I talk frequently, and Debbie and I do also, on the podcast about the divide between red America, blue America. But is this divide getting worse? Are we in fact approaching what could be called a great divergence in which two parts of the country really pull almost irreconcilably apart? I say irreconcilably because you can only have a common ground when you agree about your goals, but you disagree about means. If you agree that America should be prosperous, you can argue about how to get there. If you agree on protecting life, you can argue about what's the best way to do that. Problem is when the two sides want to go in different directions, they disagree about ends. Now, this certainly occurred in the time leading up to the Civil War, in which the essentially Whig and then Republican North began to diverge from the pro-slavery Democratic South and disagree fundamentally. It wasn't just at the time of the founding, there was a kind of virtually universal agreement that slavery was a bad thing, even if it should be temporarily tolerated. It should not be allowed to grow or to expand, and the slave trade should not be allowed to proliferate. But what happened in the early 19th century was you got two sides, one of which basically said slavery is bad and should be restricted, the other which said slavery is good and should be expanded. And that was the cleavage that produced ultimately the horrific Civil War. Now, interestingly, today you may say our situation isn't that. We don't have a single issue like slavery, but in some ways it's even worse because we disagree on so many things. The Americans of the 19th century agreed on most things. They agreed about hard work and industry and free markets. Even the South, with this big feudal or semi-feudal institution of slavery, was part of a global free market. They were selling cotton on the open market, selling it to England. They were part of global, you may say, free trade. And so here's an interesting article written from the left by Michael Podhoretzer, or at least referring to an analysis by Michael Podhoretzer. And what he says is that America has had these divisions that are sort of deeply embedded in the country for a long time. But he argues that there was a temporary truce, a kind of American coming together from the 1930s to the 1980s, a kind of half century in which these differences became moderated. He doesn't really explain why he thinks that was the case. He seems to suggest maybe it's because of the welfare state. I actually don't think that's the main cause. In my view, if this is right, if there was a temporary moderation, it was really due to the sort of two massive events of the Depression and World War II. There's nothing like hardship and scarcity. Perhaps even the Cold War, the existential threat from abroad, tends to bring a country together and blur differences. But, says Podhoretzer, with all that now having receded, the differences have become really stark. And blue people, he argues, and I find this a little hard to believe, but this in a way ratifies his point. He says blue people like to live in blue America. They think it's more modern, it's more technological, it's more high-tech, it includes Silicon Valley. And they don't care that much about the things that red people care about. They know that red America is safer. They know that red America has better housing prices. They know that red America has more economic opportunity. In fact, why do you think people are moving from the blue states to the red states? It's because jobs are more plentiful. The weather is generally better, with, of course, the notable exception of California. And the red states are actually, in many ways, booming. They're safer. They support family values. But Podhoretzer's point is maybe the blue people don't care about those things. They don't care about family values. They would rather live in a kind of college town environment where you have weirdness all around, keep Austin weird. And they prefer that lifestyle. They don't mind if their car gets occasionally burgled, I suppose. Now, he's not saying that this is going to lead to civil war. It could, but it might not. It could be that you just have these two. It's kind of like two neighbors. They're going to live side by side, and they really don't like each other, and they don't speak a lot, and they clash a lot over, your tree fell over my lawn, and so on. And they obviously, in this case, the clash is also because we have a shared federal government that appropriates resources from both blue and red America and then disperses them according to an ideology that at least now seems clearly aligned with blue America. There's some nonsense in this article that I will ignore completely about how red America is more authoritarian. This is all complete nonsense. Red America is no more authoritarian. In fact, blue America is authoritarian. Maybe even this perspective reflects the divide again, that those of us who sympathize with red America see blue America as trying to impose its will on us. And then from the left, they think that red America, which they consider to be a minority. Now, it's not a minority in terms of physical size or even in terms of counties or even in terms of people. Red America as a group is about the same size as blue America. But they think that blue America has a certain kind of democratic priority, and red Americans using such tools as the Supreme Court and the Senate are trying to somehow suppress blue America from exercising its natural majority over the entire country.